So once again, greetings and welcome. I am Michelle Mosley with the University of California, San Francisco, Office of Community Engagement, and I'm serving as your co-host and moderator for our emotional brain training session. By now, many of you are experienced, I know, Zoom users, so please indulge me for just a moment. Make sure your microphone is on mute, and please only come off mute when you have been identified, acknowledged, and given permission to do that. We do need to keep everyone in a mute mode except for those who are speaking or presenting in some capacity. Please use the chat feature to communicate with me, the co-host, as well as the other two co-hosts who will be introducing themselves shortly. That will be the primary method for communicating in terms of if you have a question or a comment. At the end of our presentation, we will allot a time for questions and answers. Again, we'll be pulling those from the chat box. So please, if you can adhere to those Zoom etiquette and Zoom guidelines, that's going to make our session today go very smoothly. A little bit about the UCSF Office of Community Engagement. Our mission is to reduce cancer disparities and inequities through equitable community and academic partnerships for service and research. We also disseminate information, conduct cancer education, and health promotion activities to increase awareness and knowledge, as well as we advocate for policies that address racism and the social and structural determinants of health. Next, I'm going to turn it over to our co-host, Claire and Joyce, for their remarks. Claire and Joyce.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks everyone for being here. We're really excited for today's event. My name is Claire Donnelly, and I'm the chair of UCOP's Black Staff and Faculty Organization. I'll pass it off to Joyce to introduce herself, and then we'll go into a little bit more into what Bsfo does and what events we have upcoming.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joyce Price, and I am the co-chair of Bsfo. I'm just going to give you a little bit of background history of Bsfo for the ones that may not know. We originated at the Berkeley campus in 1992. And then when we amended the bylaws in 1995, the committee decided to migrate to to UCOP, Office of the President. And we've been very active for the last 30 plus years. And I will say that we have done an incredible job in trying to educate and keep our people informed on the different things that are going on. So sorry about that. The different things that are going on within the community. So with that being said, we have created several different events that we do annually versus monthly. And Claire, I'm going to allow Claire to kind of go more in detail about the different events that we are hosting and the ones that are upcoming. Thank you. I'll turn it back to you, Claire.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I'll definitely keep it brief, but we at Bsfo aim to support our Black staff and faculty at OP as well as system-wide. We also have programs that support students through an annual scholarship program. And of course, we also work to implement and support policies that combat racism, in our community and within the UC community, particularly as well. And then finally, we implement programming throughout the year, as Joyce mentioned. So we have programs for Juneteenth, Black History Month, health events, and that's why we're so excited about today's event as one of our health partnerships here. So we have great programming for Black History Month next month, and you'll definitely be seeing more from us on that. We have a museum event, our scholarship selection ceremony, an event with President Drake, and there will be more from us. So thank you again, and thank you, Michelle, for the time to introduce ourselves.
All right, thank you, Claire and Joyce and BSFO, for your partnership on today's session. All right, so Dr. Valerie Yerger will present on emotional brain training to help us with information and tips to better manage stressors and stress. We are thrilled to have her join us. And now, brief highlights about Dr. Yerger's background, practice, and research. Dr. Yerger is a professor in health policy at the University of California, San Francisco, and is clinically trained in naturopathic medicine and licensed as a naturopathic doctor and as a midwife. A historical fact is that she was the first licensed midwife in the state of California. Dr. Yerger's research and advocacy work focuses on addressing the disproportionate burden of tobacco among Black and Brown and other marginalized communities as a social justice priority and to inform public health policies. She has served as an advisor and scholar to many programs and committees and received numerous awards and commendations at the local, state, and national levels. One of Dr. Yerger's quotes, "Being joyful keeps me from secreting stress hormones, which then allows me to share more easily my light and my love with others." I am also able to call her soror, which means sister, as we are both proud members of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, an international public service organization. Dr. Yerger, thank you, and please proceed.
Well, thank you for that, Sora Michelle. And thank you, Claire. I really appreciate this opportunity. We've got a nice group of individuals that are attending. That makes me very, very happy. I have been working with Michelle and the UCSF Helen Diller Family Comprehensive Cancer Center with their community gatherings for years. And we have sort of like grown together in this work to help bring some relief to those of us who are working to improve our communities. And we are the gate watchers or gatekeepers, however you want to look at it. And we are the ones who have been privileged to get educated and to get connected. And we are the ones who are wanting so much to make sure that we do all that we can in our lifetimes to help this place be a better place for our families, our loved ones, and our communities. So I want to thank you for that. Also, before I begin, and I do need to share my slides, I am or was the first licensed midwife in California. That does not include the nurse midwives. So I don't want you guys thinking nurse midwives aren't licensed. It's a totally different category. It was my license as a naturopathic doctor that positioned me to do that. And I wish I could talk about why I am not doing that any longer, but I got bitten by the policy bug, and that's where I've landed. So let me begin now by sharing my slides. And it's never an easy transition for me, so be patient with me. Here we go. So Michelle, are you in a position to tell me whether or not the slides are visible?
Yes, we can see them.
Wonderful. So I am here to talk about stress, but I am also able to loosely connect this to one of the deliverables of my contract with the California Department of Public Health. I'm the project director of the Loop. We are a statewide tailored assistance training project that provides training and resources to the grantees of the California Tobacco Control Program, helping grantees to connect and be aware of the role that racism and inequities play in keeping people smoking. So what I will present here will be really tailored for you as the audience, but this is the sort of direction that we're going in the state as the state has declared that the year 2035 will be the year, if not before then, that our state becomes tobacco free. So that is our mission, and there are many of us, myself included, and others who are on this webinar, I see, who understand that if we don't take action now to engage our communities that are disproportionately smoking, that we may in fact have a huge gap. Those who aren't smoking and those who continue to smoke, who reflect the communities that we work with. So all of this is really to address the need to look not only at cessation opportunities, but what are the things that we can do so that people can deal with their whole coping of the stressors that we deal with on a daily, if not hourly, in an hourly way, so that we're not driven to smoke or do other activities just as a way of coping. So having said that, I do want to begin by acknowledging the fact that we're still dealing with COVID-19. We have many in our families that we have lost, not only because they may have been dealing with some sort of underlying chronic conditions, but many of our family members are frontline workers. They're essential workers and caretakers. And whether or not we've lost someone directly because of COVID-19, but during this pandemic, for sure, we have lost loved ones because of stress. So I do want to take a moment. I have a number of SOARs who are on here, and we have had a horrific 24 hours, and I don't want to get into it anymore. If you are interested in what I'm talking about and you have a loved one or a friend who's a Delta, talk to her directly. But I do want to connect and acknowledge that we have participants here who are dealing with a lot of pain and grief right now. So let's talk about our stress. You know, stress is a common denominator that affects all of us, right? Our bodies are actually hardwired to react to stress in ways that are really designed to protect us from threats, from predators and other aggressors. The problem is that a lot of times the threats aren't real, right? They're perceived. And so part of us recognizing how we can help our own bodies and minds and souls deal with stress is being able to understand the stress process. I'm going to talk a little bit about the fight-flight response. I will be speaking to you from the perspective of one single mother who has raised 4 kids. I've been at UC San Francisco for over 20 years. I am a professor, but I'm adjunct, which means that I've had to fight to make sure that I have a paycheck for the last 20 years. We can get into the structural presence of policies and rules and biases that really interfere with us being able to sort of progress like we see others of our co-workers doing. But it is what it is, and we find ways of dealing with it so that we can continue to survive and take care of our families. So I will talk a little bit about that, but I'm also coming at you from a perspective of a naturopathic doctor. So there'll be things that I will share that are specifically from understanding the role of our body to maintain homeostasis, which is to maintain balance. And when we are dealing with stress, we're out of balance. And so I hope to enlighten you about that as well. But I also, as the title of my talk is, going to introduce you to emotional brain training. And when I get to that point in my talk, I'll share a little bit about how I found my way to EBT, which actually happened on the campus of UC San Francisco back in 2009. So I've been doing this for a while. But stress does come about in our daily world, and our body, believe it or not, is really designed to deal with it. The problem is when we have too much of it, we don't necessarily have an opportunity to utilize all the mechanisms that are in place in our body to keep us safe and whole. So we know that during the pandemic, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we as not only as members of whatever priority population group you might be in, or whatever subpopulation group you might be in, whether you live in California, whether you're on the call from the East Coast, whether you're in another part of the world. The stress overload is a pandemic that is affecting all of us globally. And it is this exposure to the chronic stress and the repeated activation of our stress response system that really makes our bodies less able to respond to stress. And it results in our body having allostatic loads of stress response hormones being the reason why our bodies are so overburdened. When we look at the effects of COVID, there was a paper that came out, and I'm sure there are others to support this, but you can see that when you compare how people perceive their stress levels based on the age group, based on the year, you see that the blue bar on the chart represents 2018 when the results were captured, and then again in 2020 the results were captured, and you see the bars in orange. And what should stand out for you is the fact that every group has increased at least their perception of the amount of stress that they're dealing directly due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And so we want to deal with stress primarily because we want to be able to continue thriving in this world in spite of it all. But here's the deal. When we're under stress and we're around other individuals, stress is contagious. And so we may, in fact, be having an effect on our others, around us, whether they're our coworkers, whether they're our children or our live-in partners. So being aware of it and understanding that it's not enough to think that you're doing okay. It really calls for us to know, in fact, that we are doing okay because others depend on us so much. So stress, as you know, can come from unexpected places. If you've got, I live out in an area where I've got coyotes. I don't go out at night. I will keep a stinking garbage bag in my house and take it out in the morning, then to go in the back and empty the garbage. That's a real threat. I have to be careful. And I know that there's some people who say that coyotes aren't really as mean as people think they are. I don't want to find out how mean or how nice the ones are around my house. But there are other stressors that we don't necessarily recognize and think about, but they are with us all the time. And I've listed a few of them. They can be external or even internal stress. They can be perceived, as I mentioned before, or real. But very often, unfortunately, stressors come grouped together. So being able to identify your stress means that sometimes you have to think about, is it in a group of other stressors? So if I'm going to work on one stressor, I need to recognize, are there other stressors that are connected to it? So in addition to some of the obvious stressors, the emotional baggage that we have from our current and even past interpersonal relationships, be them home, work, isolation has become an incredible stressor for so many of us. Yes, I live alone. I appreciate the fact that I live alone because I have a more protected bubble, but I am not getting the attention, the physical touching that we so much need in order to thrive. It's once in a while when I get to see my kids or my grandkids. That causes stress in my life, and I'm sure it causes stress in others who have to live alone. We know that the role that financial, even educational inequities play on us. If we're taking care of family members and we're not getting enough help, people aren't traveling to even help family members care for an older loved one, for example. And one of the biggest ones that we are dealing with is the fact that we, depending on which group we're part of, we're dealing with a constant exposure to structural and institutional racism. And yes, we think that we can get away with it, whether we're perpetuating or we're receiving it, but really we can't. It is having an effect on us. And then there are environmental toxins. And I don't have the time to do this, but I do want to just give a very quick recognition that those of us who have higher levels of melanin are actually, our tissues that contain melanin actually collect and accumulate toxins. And that's research that I have published during the 2004, 5, 6 area. And it's becoming something that I think I'm going to talk about more because it's relevant to the stress. So when we're encountering a threat, whether it's real or perceived, it really it alarms a system in our body called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. Otherwise, we call it HPA axis. And so that's why it's important to recognize if a stressor is real or perceived, because if you get to understand those stressors that are perceived that you don't have to respond to, you can actually relieve the pressure on your body to actually respond to whatever happens as a result of this alarm being triggered. So once this HPA axis alarm gets triggered, it actually starts a cascade of events. It starts with the brain perceiving a threat, which then triggers the hypothalamus, which is a lower part of the brain, to secrete CRH, which is corticotropin releasing hormone. That CRH then acts on the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland will respond by secreting ACTH, which is, for those who want more information, the adrenocorticotropic hormone. And that ACTH then acts directly on the adrenal glands, and that's on the top of the kidneys. And that interaction of the ACTH with the adrenal glands results in a surge of hormones, including adrenaline and cortisol. So it's the HPA axis that controls the reactions to stress, and it regulates digestion, it regulates the immune system, it regulates our mood and emotions, and this is just to name a few. And I want to take a moment here so I don't forget, but for those of you who eat while you're stressed, and I know that is a lot of us, well, guess what? When we're stressed, we're not digesting because it is not a primary function of the body that is in a stress mode. When you're in stress, it's all about getting out of a threatening situation. So digestion's not important. So eating while stressed, I would recommend you not do that because you're not going to digest your food. Now we can have another naturopathic conversation about what happens when you don't digest those food molecules, but that's another talk. So just understand when you are going to eat, if you say your blessings, if you take a moment to do a little yoga stretching, whatever, that's actually good to do because it helps to get you out of any potential stress mode so that you can properly eat and chew and take your time and allow your food to be digested. So when we face many demands each day, as we do, such as taking on huge workloads, paying your bills that you have to do, taking care of our families, whatever those things that we do all of the time, the body results in feeling that it's under attack. So the adrenaline increases your heart rate, it elevates your blood pressure, and it actually boosts your energy supplies because it's trying to get you prepared to either fight the threat or to flight away from the stress. So hence fight, flight. So I, just want to help you to understand that if we're constantly in stress, and we're constantly in fight or flight, we are constantly in a survival mode. So I'm going to come back to that being in a survival mode a little bit later, but remember that. And I want to say that one of the things that I am particularly concerned about when so many of us are in this survival mode is that it really forces us to take the role of either predator or prey. I want you to think about that. So you're in a situation where you're dealing with coworkers, you're dealing with family, you're dealing with members in your organization. You are under stress, but you don't understand that you're under stress, and you're in a survival mode, and you're going to either be the one who is going to be in the role of predator or prey. What does that mean in terms of us connecting and collaborating and creating with one another, and in being in, for some of us, in a place where we're to love and be sisterly? And so I want to put that on your mind, because I definitely think it's something that we're going to have to address in order for us to move forward. So the long-term activation of stress, and the overexposure to cortisol and all the other stress hormones are really the root cause of 80 and even up to 90% of chronic diseases. So we know that when we are under a lot of stress and we're in this allostatic load, that it puts us at risk for these chronic diseases. And sometimes, it's clear that we're under stress. Other times we're not so clear about it. So I am losing control of my slides. There we go. So I want to talk to you about this boiling frog syndrome. I've known about it for quite a while, and it was really funny when I was looking for an image, and apparently a lot of people are now talking about it. So frogs are very similar to humans, in that they can adapt to their environments depending on the situation. So that's why the frog makes a very good example for this. If you place a frog in a pot of burning water, it's going to jump out. That's what the first top image is. Frog goes in, he's not happy, he's going to get out of there. However, if you put a frog in a pot of cool water and then you slowly heat the water, as the temperature of the water rises, the frog will just adjust its body temperature, but it will still get eventually cooked. So I bring this as an analogy for us as humans, because we so quickly and very naturally adapt to our situations and environments, very similar to the frog. But this is unfortunate because stress slowly and unknowingly creeps in. And so this is sort of like equivalent to the water boiling. And as a result of being overloaded by stress, we have almost everything you can think of in terms of a chronic disease. And I just have a few things that are listed here, such as anxiety. We know the effects on the cardiovascular system, so that puts us at risk for hypertension, heart disease, stroke. A lot of people think that, you have diabetes because you got sugar in the blood. Well, you have sugar in the blood, and that does contribute to the diabetes. There's no doubt about it. But we very seldom talk about cortisol and the role that cortisol plays in suppressing your ability to get that sugar out of the blood. So cancer, we know, infant mortality, it just goes on and on and on. And I want to, talk about these eroding telomeres, if I may, just for a second. So we asked, what are telomeres? Sometimes people know. If I had had more time to create a question, I would have done a poll, but I'm going to assume that you don't know, or you're not quite sure what a telomere is. And so the way that I explain this when I'm talking to my community members is that telomeres are the stabilizing caps on chromosomes, and they shorten with cell division until a certain number of the chromosomes are just no longer stable and the cell can actually die. So researchers have reported that at birth, there are no racial differences in the length of the telomere. But we have come to understand that social and environmental factors are important contributors to how long telomeres are in adults. And so the persistent high effect coping that so many of us do really leads to a faster rate of our telomeres shortening. And what does this mean? It means that the shortening of the telomeres is reflective of how much allostatic load we have been living under, not only for years or for decades. So middle-aged Black women, for example, have shorter average telomere length when compared to white women. And we know that stressors that are associated with perceived stress, poverty, and other inequities contribute to the Black and white differences that we see in telomere lengths among adults. And I, very often will use this as an analogy. People know what the ends of shoelaces look like. I know that some of us are still using shoelaces, but those little plastic ends of a shoelace is very much like the end of the chromosome, which is the telomere. And just as an example, to show you that when those shoelaces come apart at the end, it becomes very difficult to use your shoelace. They just unravel. And that is what we see when telomeres are shortening and they become degraded because of the amount of stress that we have. So, we've had a number of national health initiatives to reduce health disparities, but until we really understand the role that stress plays and the role that institutional and structural racism play, until we understand that the constant stress load due to the social, economic, educational, political inequities that we're dealing with, we're going to continue to see these disparities. And I just wanted to, I'm basically sharing with you copies of papers that have been written, and this is just a small sampling. So how do I cope with stress? That might be a question that you're asking. Well, many of us have what we call in EBT external solutions, which means we have receptor sites in our brain that are designed to accept the feel-good hormones that we naturally secrete, like serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine. We don't secrete those like we could because of the stress. So those receptor sites are calling for something to sit on them. So we get really active with doing things that we do outside that bring us some sort of relief. There are almost always consequences to seeking relief, whether we're smoking cigarettes, whether we're smoking marijuana, whether we are overeating, whether we are gambling. People don't even know that, fighting, which can be very addictive for some of us because of the cortisol and the adrenaline that is being secreted. If you are over exercising for whatever reason, because you're getting your feel-good hormones that way, you could actually be pushing yourself into a further stress mode. So you can actually over exercise yourself into chronic stress. I have this as, to show what happens when you are shopping. You've got, you feel good when you go out and shop, and you're shopping because you're not feeling so good because you're dealing with stress. There are consequences. There are bills that have to be paid, whether you've got somebody who's monitoring your spending or whether you don't and you have to take a look at it, there are consequences. So there are actually some stress management modes that are out there. We've been trying to do this for a long time to understand how to fix us. And I use this next diagram. I'm not going to talk about it. It's supposed to be busy. It's supposed to make your head go crazy because this is a diagram that if you were to take the time and look at it, you could actually follow through each of the branches here to a method that has been shown to be helpful for dealing and managing your stress. And if you go to the core, you see this person here is just like, he's even totally stressed. So I want to say that there are methods out there, and some of them have been extremely useful and helpful, but just know that they may not get to the core. Generally, when we go to a licensed therapist or someone who is certified to help us deal with stress, they're going to use a lot of methods that can be sort of categorized as either health education or cognitive behavioral therapy or lifestyle changes. You might be able to talk to someone and get some insight about what makes you stress. You might be able to find something that helps you to relax. Mindfulness, which is a huge area that is getting a lot of attention and has shown to be helpful with dealing with our stress. But all of these things are actually cognitive based. And if we're really stressed out, we're not in our thinking brain. And you're going to say, what's a thinking brain? I'm getting to that. So the thinking brain may not be able to be switched off during stress. So you may not really be getting to the root cause by just focusing in on those therapeutic modalities that I mentioned. We cannot think our way out of stress. There has been studies shown that cognitive control simply isn't effective. They work when we're at low stress levels, but they do not work as well, even at all, when we are very, very stressed out. And I would say a lot of us are spending more time being extremely stressed out. So as our stress rises, the emotional brain becomes dominant. And when I first got into EBT, I was, told about this emotional brain. And we've been walking around with this emotional brain since before we were born. And most of us aren't even aware that we are being controlled by it. So unless we have emotional tools to deal with our emotional brain, we're not going to be able to get a lot of relief. And as you can see that as we have higher levels of stress, we have more health problems. That is something that has been shown over and over again. So now we're entering into the possibility to even consider, what would it be like to live in a world where you could actually power off your stress load? So what if we could actually switch it? And so as we become aware of the role of the emotional brain, we're finding ways to connect the emotional brain with our thinking brain so that we can actually bring our stress level down, we can decrease the secretion of stress hormones, and we can have fewer health problems. And for me, that means getting out of the survival mode as we are planning to deal with our future and connecting and helping to increase our community wellness. And for the state of California, for me, that means helping our people to find a way to get off tobacco and other substances that keep them sort of coping over and over again with stress. So there's a way for us to take charge. And this is what I would like to spend the rest of my time talking about. I apologize if I've gone over with the stress, but I think that it's important for us to have a background so we can understand why it is we can take control. How we respond to stress is controlled by our brain circuits. And these are strings of neurons that get automatically activated. But guess what? These brain circuits are stored in our emotional brain. And these brain circuits are actually encoded before the age 4. Even during when you're pregnant with your baby, and as a midwife, just intuitively, I knew to tell my patients to just constantly touch and talk to your baby, because that is a time when these neurons are actually being set. The only other time we create new neurons is under extreme stress. But once these circuits are encoded, they get replayed for a lifetime, over and over and over again. Even small daily stressors are enough to trigger them. I just want to share this quote from Dr. Insel when he was director of the National Institute of Mental Health. He recognized early on that health problems are biological problems involving the brain circuits. And so emotional brain training is what we call lovingly EBT, is really a new brain-based approach to dealing with our stress overload. EBT helps us to switch off these reactive circuits, and they help us to rewire new circuits. And if we are able to heal our past trauma, if we are able to grieve our losses, then we are able to have control of our emotional brain instead of our emotional brain having control of us. So the emotional brain is actually, we can see it anatomically. So literally, when we are in our thinking brain, we are in the top part, the prefrontal part of our brain. That's where we hang out. The thinking brain is where we are able to create, to collaborate, to interact, to build a better community. And as we get more stress, more cortisol in our blood, our control actually moves further down into our brain. And that is a result, a direct relationship with the amount of cortisol that we have. So as we start moving further down into the brain, we start getting more into the emotional brain. And so we have 5 brain states that we recognize in EBT, where again, being in brain state 1, we have very low stress, and being in brain state 5, we have very high stress. And this is the work that we do to be able to connect with our thoughts, be able to connect with our feelings and our behavior. EBT allows us to make these connections so that we're not only in our thoughts, we're not only in our feelings, and we're not only in our behaviors, but we can actually communicate between these 3 things. So when we have stress overload, we have very reactive circuits. That's why we say things, we do things without thinking, right? I mean, I'm not saying anything that we haven't all experienced, but we might not understand it is because we are functioning further down in our emotional brain that causes us to be so emotionally reactive. And I think we'll be able to share these so you can take a look at it. I want to kind of move through this so I can get to a little bit more of the juice of what I'm talking about. But we use EBT to switch from reactive circuits to resilient circuits. And that puts us into control so that we are much more able to respond in a way that doesn't make us regret what we've said or we've done. We have taken more control. So the EBT allows us to go from a place of stress where we are so reactive that we start to spiral down and we start to lose ourselves, and being able to stop ourselves and to start spiraling up so that we can make decisions to get out of those spaces where we cause a lot of harm. So these tools that we have help people to spiral up and to really access those resilient circuits so that we're not being controlled by the reactive circuits. We have, there have been a number of studies that have been done, and we have been able to show in this one study, when we involved 33 participants, we gave them 30 minutes of training. That's how quick you can teach people how to do this. And within less than 3 minutes, we watched them go from a very severe emotional state to one where they had started to spiral up. And I want to give kudos here to Lowell Mellon. She's who I met back in 2009. I was one of the individuals who responded to an email that she sent. She had a brown bag talk on the campus of UCSF. And what she was saying about stress and how to respond to it spoke to me as a naturopathic doctor, but it also spoke to me because I myself was dealing with a lot of stress. I am here today. I am totally convinced because of EBT. But EBT helps people who are in crisis and who feel hopeless to really get into their emotional brain, where they get an opportunity to access those circuits that have been fired and to express their strong negative emotions that are associated with those circuits so that they can see and hear themselves. So it's a very specific brain savvy way that we help people to access the reactive circuits and to express strong emotions. And within, like I said, 2 to 3 minutes, we watch people switch their circuit. And it isn't something that is intuitive. It is something that has to be shown and taught. People have been able to find hope and power. They can be in extreme distress and be able to switch off the wire, as this young woman is, to 2 to 3 minutes. Look at her. And this is something that I have observed in myself and in others that I have had some opportunity to help with this. So when we are dealing with EBT, we have to identify which one of our brain states we are in so that we can access the appropriate tool. So when you are in a brain state 1, you are feeling great. You are secreting oxytocin. You are secreting serotonin. You are secreting the feel-good hormones. Do we secrete feel-good hormones all day long? No, because we're not in brain state 1 all day long. But when you go into brain state 1, you start to recognize when you are there. And the more you do it, the more easily you can get to it. And I know everyone that is listening to me now knows what it feels like to be in a place of joy. I'm not talking about being happy. I'm talking about being joyful, because joyfulness is the active secretion of feel-good hormones. And if you know how to get there on purpose when you need to secrete the hormones, you will decrease the amount of cortisol that is causing destruction in your body. And this is what EBT helps us to do. Brain state 2 is another homeostatic brain state, which means we're not secreting cortisol, we're not causing harm, but we may not be secreting feel-good hormones, but that's okay. We don't need to secrete them all day long. We just need to maintain a state of homeostasis so that we're not secreting cortisol. You do not secrete cortisol when you're in brain state 1 or 2. When you go into brain state 3, 4, and 5, you start to recognize, you have opportunities to recognize that you are either a little stressed, that you're definitely stressed, or you're totally stressed out. And just to give you a sort of example of how you know what's the difference between brain state 3 and brain state 4 and brain state 5. Brain state 3, a lot of us, myself included, we spend a lot of time in brain state 3. It's that little nagginess that might be going on that you can't put your finger on. You start, if you're doing the tools of EBT, you'll find out that there are a lot of things that are kind of bugging you. It's being in a car and that radio's playing in the background. Oh, that's what it is. You turn the radio off. So it's being in that state where I'm not feeling. But if you have EBT, you can take a moment to figure out what it is so you can shut it down and go up into brain state 1 or 2. Brain state 4 is there is one thing or one person or one situation that is stressing you out. You don't have to wonder what it is. You know what it is. Brain state 4 is actually a very wonderful place to be in if you're doing the work of EBT, because that is where we do our best work, because that allows us to tap into the particular reactive circuit and being able to turn it around to a resilient one. So that's where we do our work, is working with brain state 4. We might find ourselves in a brain state 3 and we have the time. We're going to make ourselves go into brain state 4 just to do the work. Brain state 5 is that state where we're throwing things, we're yelling at people, we are not reasonable. If my daughter was here, she'd tell you, like I've heard her tell other people, my mother will hang up on me. If my daughter's in a brain state 5, I don't deal with her. I don't deal with drama. If I can help it, I don't deal with folks who are stressed out. If someone is open to me bringing them up to a brain state 4 or brain state 3, I will do that with them. But sometimes you can't do that when people are in brain state 5. So you love them. You have compassion for them. And frankly, I don't think I've ever hung up on my daughter. I probably said, I'll talk to you in a few minutes. But for her, because she's in brain state 5, that's what she's perceiving. I'm being mean and nasty and I'm hanging up on her. Brain state 5 is where we do our most harm. We say things that we can't take back. We do things that we can't take back. So we can help ourselves by recognizing if we need to move away from a person or help the person move up. Because sometimes we have a right to be in brain state 5. If I'm in a brain state 5 and you make me know I'm in a brain state 5, I might say to you, I got reason for being in a brain state 5. Hallelujah, leave me alone and let me be. But if we are hanging out there and we don't understand, that's where we can have the greatest help for our family. I just want to also, because I know that we're running a little bit out of time, and I haven't looked at the chat. I'm thinking there might be some questions, but I just wanted to give you another way of looking at these brain states. Think of them as a drawer, where your top drawer is your low stress, your second drawer is lower. So we go from very low stress in the top drawer, low stress in the second drawer, moderate stress in the third drawer, high stress in the fourth drawer, and very high stress in the fifth drawer. What is in those drawers as you take them, if you open the drawers, are memories. And so those memories of you doing your best work, being able to bring something to the table, those are likely to be in drawer 1 or drawer 2. But as you start moving down, those memories that are connected to your very high stress experiences, to your drama, there might be some intergenerational drama that you don't even know about that's stuck somewhere in a brain state 4 or 5. So when you do the work of EBT, you're actually accessing those memories, and you're doing it in a way where you're being coached and helped and supported in a very safe and trusting environment so that you can find out these. Because what goes along with these drawers are circuits, and the circuits get active, and guess what? They start activating other circuits that are in the drawer. So before you know it, you've got a bunch of circuits happening. So the further down you are in this set of drawers, the more stress that you have, the more reactive your circuits are going to be accessed and actually very active. So these are just very basically the tools that we have available. Why do you need to do a tool if you're in brain state 1 or brain state 2? It just helps you stay engaged with the work. And where we do the work in EB2 requires tools that help us to access brain state 3, 4, and 5 circuits. There is an app that is available. If you go to Brain-Based Health, you'll find the app. You can visit the website ebt.org. I do have a way of sharing this information with you should you want to explore it. Otherwise, it's a subscription, and I don't get any financial throwback from this at all, but I'm just sharing with you because $9.99 is not a bad deal to help you deal on a daily basis throughout the day. There are specific tools in the app that help us to deal with these incredible overloaded, stressful situations that we're having. We have gone from needing to increase our tools just to deal with the stress overload, and that is accessible through the app. These additional cores for dealing with the stress overload help us make a decision as to whether or not we are in a situational stress and we simply want to feel better, or if we want to change a particular behavior. This is where we help to identify the circuits and help to stop the trigger of that circuit. If we are simply having some sort of anxiety attack in a moment, there's a tool to help us feel better right then and there. If you want to do some real work to go back to that 3-year-old brain, that's available in the app. And then if you need to really grieve some losses, there's a tool in the app that helps us to clear the clutter. The one thing about EBT, because I've probably said some things about your cognitive behavioral therapy, guess what? You can use them together. They have been shown to work extremely well with any traditional program. So you do your check-in exercises using the tool. You identify what your brain state is, and then you access the associated tool. And then it's good to just plan your check-ins all the time throughout the day. If I have a moment or two, I just want to quickly talk about the history of EBT. It's been around since 2007, as I mentioned before. It came out of UCSF. We have documented at least 500,000 people who are using it. I have to tell you all, They don't look like many of us here. This is why I want so much for this work to get out, because those of us who are really dealing with some incredible stress, we need to have access to an available cheap tool as well. I just wanted to acknowledge, again, these are my colleagues at UC San Francisco who have been able to document the success of rewiring the stress response using EBT. EBT has been well studied over the years, and this shows, how people can change how they are wired and become more resilient to have more positive emotions, basically increase the amount of time that they spend in brain state 1 or brain state 2 and less time in brain state 4 or brain state 5. Dr. Merzenich said many, many years ago, EBT is a gift from science to you. And with that, I will leave you and take whatever available questions. I see there's I don't know what's in the chat. Looks like a lot. So if I may just quickly show that there are some available tools. I direct my people to Amazon. I know some of you may have an issue with Amazon, but right now you can get either the 30-day stress overload course or the 30-day stress eating course. I highly recommend it. Very user-friendly, very easy to do. If you're going to do the app, I recommend the workbook. I think it was less than $20. This was Dr. Mellon's book. And so thank you. Here's my contact information. That's my number at work. I still access my messages. I haven't been in my office since, I think, early March 2020. It's been a while, but I do look at my email. So thank you all. And if I may leave you, don't secrete cortisol for just anyone. I tell people, if I'm secreting cortisol for you, I love you, but I'm not going to secrete cortisol for somebody I don't love. And that's just me. All right. Thank you all.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Yerger.
You're welcome.
How are we feeling, people? Are we feeling inspired and empowered to know where we are and to put some tools into practice to bring our stress level down? So Claire, I did see a few questions in the question and answer in the chat, and I'm wondering if we could turn it over to you to read those questions out.
Absolutely, Michelle. And yeah, Dr. Yerger, I think you saw a lot of chat activity. A lot of it was just in support of this presentation and really just seeing how interesting it is. So thank you. The first question, I think we got an answer in the chat, but maybe just one more time, if you could share the name of the app, that would be really great, just so we can put the name out there one more time.
If you search brain-based health, it will come up and it'll show EBT. I wish it was as easy as just putting in EBT, but think brain and think based health, because it's really about changing the brain. So brain-based.
Perfect. Thank you.
And if you have any questions about how to access, if you want to do work in EBT, I'm actually certified as a coach, but I don't have time to do it. If y'all know what I'm doing, I just don't have time. We need us doing the work. And if you're interested, I will help facilitate that. I will personally help you facilitate it. If you need a job and you want a career, just saying.
Thank you. I'm moving on to the next question. This next one, from this information, especially brain state 4 and 5, I see that it is possible that practicing EBT may be a tool for the prevention of dementia and Alzheimer's disease. What do you think about that?
I don't know. Not in particular. I think for right now, what I'm familiar with is the use of EBT for dealing with our daily stress, dealing with our addictive. I hate to use the word behaviors, but our dependency, if you will, on addictive activities. Yeah, I don't know if the research is out there yet, because I think there's some other things that are happening to the brain that accumulate over time. Um, but I definitely think it won't hurt to engage, and it gives you an opportunity to work directly with somebody, a family member who has those conditions.
Great. Thank you. And then the next question, is there evidence that melanin also accumulates toxins other than nicotine?
Oh, absolutely. As my research shows, and if we're going to stay with tobacco, it's not only nicotine, but it's also the tobacco-specific carcinogens that that accumulate in tissues containing melanin. But we also know, and this is from research that's easily available in the literature, lead, your heavy metals, your environmental toxins. What I would like, and you guys can invite me to come back and talk about this, because it would take an hour to talk about what happens when the body needs to produce stress hormones. It also produces something called MSH, which is melanocyte stimulating hormone. So when the body starts to synthesize melanin, it will take in a lot of the toxins, because melanin is a detoxifier. So if we're living in conditions with a lot of toxins, and you're a person of color and you're under stress, you're going to be accumulating, because that's the nature of the melanin. It's just that I believe that when we were created, we weren't meant to be exposed to all the toxins that we have around us. But yes.
Thank you for that. We're flooded with a lot of thank yous. I think I found another question here. Can you share an example of what it looks like to coach yourself or someone else from perhaps a 5 to a 4, or from a 4 to a 3?
Like I did before coming on to this. So yeah, that's an excellent question. And, I wasn't sure how to incorporate that in this kind of platform. But the first thing that I do is to take a moment where I know I won't be disturbed. So if I've got 3 to 5 minutes, I will go someplace and I will just get comfortable, and I will notice how I'm feeling, and I will place myself in the position of someone who's in a brain state 1. Because right away, just being in a brain state 1 communicates with your brain. It increases your awareness to what's happening with you in the moment. And then I will just do a few deep breaths. And when you breathe correctly, you breathe in through your nose and out through your mouth. And when you're breathing correctly, what you'll notice is that as you're breathing in through your nose, your abdomen is actually extending. It's going out. So if you're noticing that your abdomen is going in when you breathe in, you're not breathing correctly. So if you can sort of like imagine taking in air and filling in your abdomen, so that as you're breathing in through your nose, your abdomen's going out, and you breathe out. You only need to do 3 or 5 of those, just to get you in a place where you can then ask yourself, what brain state am I in? So depending on whether or not I'm in a brain state 1 or all the way down to a 5, I will then use the appropriate tool that goes with the brain state. A brain state 1 is simply just acknowledging how you are and whether or not you need to be supported in anything. Brain state 5 will immediately, using the tool, get me out of a place, because then I just give myself permission to not do harm, to not judge myself, not judge others, and know that this will pass. And that is simply what you are saying. But for you to do that when you are conscious and aware will help you calm down enough. And sometimes I can go directly from a brain state 5 up to a brain state 3, 2, or 1. But if I have time and I want to do work, I will release myself just a little bit, just to get into a brain state 4. Because it's in a brain state 4 that I can get myself pretty angry. And that's what you need to do. The emotional brain needs to hear that you are angry. It needs to hear that you are sad. It needs to hear that you have fears. It needs to hear that you're guilty. And that's what the app allows you to do. But don't shortchange yourself thinking you'll just read through it. You have to be committed to it. If you got to go to the bathroom where you get privacy, in your car where you get privacy, pull over to the side of the road to do your work, wherever. But the work in EBT is extremely simple, and it's very non-invasive, and it can be very private, and it can be very loving when you're doing it with someone who has been trained in it and will help you.
I wish that can I just interject for 1 second, Claire? Hi, I'm Joyce. And I really wish I would have spoken to you before I came on, because these things that you're sharing with us, I experienced that. I'm overwhelmed today. I've had, Zoom calls and all this. And it's like when I got on, I thought that I took care of myself, but then I started getting where I couldn't remember anything. And it was very frustrating to me. But to see and to hear how you were able to talk me through the anxiety and everything that I was going through, and you didn't even know that I was going through it. But now I feel like I want to start over. I want us to stay online. Let me say what I needed to say and keep going. Because now I've given myself permission to realize that I don't have to be perfect in everything I do, and that I'm going to go through stress periods in my life. I don't always have to feel like I'm okay, because I was overwhelmed, but I love Bsfo so much, and I wanted to show up and I wanted to do this and be good at it. So I just wanted to thank you for that. You were helping and you didn't even know you were helping. And I'm sure that there's others on the line that you have done the same too. So I just wanted to thank you for that.
You're so welcome. And this is, what's your name? Did you say Joyce? No, who? I can't see your name.
Yes, I'm Joyce.
Okay, Joyce, you're so welcome. When you start loving yourself, it's easier to love others. That's why I showed how the stress is contagious. Well, guess what? Brain state 1 is contagious.
Yes.
You can be pulled down by somebody in brain state 5, which is why, and my daughter understands this, I don't deal with her. I love her, but I'm not going to go down to brain state 5 for you, because then we both are lost. My love for you keeps me out of a brain state 5 so I can bring you to where I am. And we start to do that for one another, and we start to feel the love that we are genuinely created to express. And I always make the assumption I'm doing good. Always, whether I get that feedback or not. There are no strings attached. You don't need to tell me that you're getting something out of it. I don't need that. But I understand it and I appreciate it. And the more that we can do that, and the more that we let go of any expectations from being the loving whole person that we are created to be, in spite of all the craziness that's going on, to know that you can still thrive. We have people who are dying. I'm here because you guys are part of an incredible group of individuals who are experts and who have access to our community. We have a lot of people that are dying. And when I say I'm in the policy world, I hear I'm there. We are not on the table. We used to be. Black folks aren't on the table anymore. We're not. We got to make sure that we stay there. But those few of us who are there, we're stressing out. So I'm getting us taken care of so that we can do more for our people. That's why I'm here. I'm not getting paid for this. The work that I'm doing, this is love work.
Thank you, Dr. Yerger. I was going to say before, Joyce said pretty much what I was thinking, that, just even the breathing itself is just such a great way to start and get grounded. And that short example you gave was helpful. And I know, Michelle, we probably have 5 or 6 more minutes, so I'll try and get through to the other questions. The next one was, how do cancer survivors manage or control their cortisol level when recurrence is on their mind, and especially leading up to things like medical appointments, scans, and procedures?
I don't think they're any different from the rest of us in that regard. They can use the tools. I think if we're talking about, and I understand that the UCSF Comprehensive Cancer Center is part of this, whether someone is dealing with cancer or some other life-threatening condition or dealing with an abusive relationship at home, once the body perceives stress, the pathways are the same. And this took me a hard time to really appreciate and understand, because I wanted to make this all about being discriminated against, and those of us who are dealing with racism, we have a higher need for this work. But what I have come to understand is that stress is not absolute, it's relative. And one of the reasons why I stopped practicing, and you guys are asking me to be real here, I'm just being real. One of the reasons why I was practicing as a naturopathic doctor was because the only place I could find patients who would pay me were down in Palo Alto. I didn't have Black patients. I had very wealthy patients. I had family members of individuals that we all know by name who were coming in complaining about their gardener not showing up or their landscape not looking well. But these were very sick people. So it's all very relative.
And another question on perception. I think the question is saying, who determines our brain state? Is the state based on others' perception on how we perceive ourselves? For example, others may perceive us as less stressed than what we actually truly feel internally, or vice versa.
That's an excellent question. So it's your personal work, and just know that where you are is going to have an effect on someone else. So if you're stressed out, it's contagious. If you're joyful, it's contagious. You'll get to a point where you recognize other people's brain states so that you can be protective and responsive appropriately. There are times when I don't feel a need to do EBT. I go out to the store, I'm doing 3 or 4 cycles.
Thank you.
So, yeah, it's all personal work.
To...
But just know you'll have an effect around those around you. So it doesn't matter how they're thinking about you or perceive. It doesn't matter. What? Not, how are you going to take something somebody's saying about you and they're in a brain state 5? Come on. I don't mean to laugh, but I'm laughing at myself because I know that place. It's like,
Well, we're at 1:13. I'm going to maybe get to 1 or 2 more. This one's specific to San Francisco, but maybe a broader question is, how can someone find an expert who's trained in this and start to work with them?
You can send me an email and I can help facilitate that, or you can go to the website. I think somebody put the website in the chat, ebt.org. A lot has been going on this week, so I didn't give Lowell a heads up. Otherwise I would have invited her. I forgot. I thought it was mean to send her a link 5 minutes before starting. So I will give her a heads up. But yeah, so either way, email me or ebt.org.
All right. Well, thank you again, Dr. Yerger. Everybody can use their reactions to do some hand claps, etc., to give our thanks and appreciation. We have learned a lot and have put your information in there for folks who are looking to get involved, become trained further, or become a practitioner, so to speak. But of course, we can always start with ourselves practicing the technique.
Absolutely.
So we want to thank you for your questions. We will be sharing the recording and the information and the resources that were provided today. So please make sure we have your email. You can do that by putting it in the chat, or you can fill out the evaluation form and include your email, and the links for that are in there as well. So let's get started, everybody, with moving ourselves through the emotional brain training levels. And let's try to get ourselves from at least one level to the next to improve. That's let that be our goal for today and this weekend. Thanks again.
All right. Thank you all. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Michelle and Claire and Joyce.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And all my sorors who are here, because love you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
You're so welcome.